Live everywhere.
Daily Co's Radio on netrootsradio.com presents
David Walton. Kagro in the Morning Show. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey everybody, how you doing? It's Friday. It's Friday, January 19th, 2018. Trying to be careful with these teen dates. And like Roy Moore, actually, now that I think about it, I wasn't planning on going in that direction. But okay, why not? I guess it's on my mind today. January 19th, 2018, the day Trump finally became president, I guess. More coming out about his encounter with Stormy Daniels. Why would I talk about substance when we have that to talk about? Honestly, I don't even know how or why we go on at this point. Do I detect a small echo in all this? By the way, everyone tell me that the audio is fine, and then I'll feel really good about it. But I think something somewhere is echoing. I'm going to have to look around to see if there's any sound leaking. Oh, there's some. Anyway, get back in there, sound. There's more Stormy Daniels stories. I might as well just put that one out there right now. I guess In Touch magazine, which is doing the whatchamahoozy interview there with what's-her-face, Stormy Daniels, has new-ish details, including one that I don't even know if I should believe this. I mean, it's a gossip rag, right? Basically. But what we're really talking about here is the new detail is, in addition to having sex with porn star Stormy Daniels, and let's posit that there's nothing wrong with that. Maybe. There is. But apparently part of the interaction that day, in addition to dinner in the room, twice, by the way, and some news about Shark Week, she says I didn't read the whole thing. I didn't read any of it yet. I don't know. Did he request this? He wanted to be spanked a little bit, I guess, by Stormy Daniels with a rolled up Forbes magazine. There definitely is an echo in here now. Close the door. Somebody's got. All right, I'll check all my buttons as we move on. I don't know if I feel like I don't have it in me to just talk about what I see tweeted. I should just read you my Twitter feed the rest of the day, and we'll all laugh about that. She spanked him with a rolled up magazine, and it was a Forbes magazine because I'm a businessman, and it was Forbes magazine, and I couldn't really believe that, and I thought, are you sure that you did that, or were you just trying to read Forbes magazine because that was what was lying around in Donald Trump's bedroom, and his gigantic ass made it impossible for you to turn the pages without actually accidentally spanking him. I don't know how big the hotel room was. It's possible that that's what happened. But then the next detail was, did you hear this? That it was did he bring it with him special? It was a Forbes magazine with Ivanka on the cover. I don't know whether people were making that up. Was that supposed to be a joke? I don't know whether anybody's making any of this stuff up. That's where we are. Just for a minute, I don't indulge very often the thinking of, well, what if it was Obama? Or imagine this happened to a Democrat, because it doesn't tell us anything. It's just complaining over and over again. But I think you have to try to imagine this now. I don't think we have anything quite like this. But of course, there was John Edwards, who had an affair while he was married and his wife was sick. And that was horrible. We never heard from him again. And he was all populist and whatnot, and I'm sure he wanted to help the coal miners and yada, yada. But it didn't work out because he was a Democrat. And Democrats care about, living up to some kind of an image. And Republicans don't, generally speaking. But Trump people definitely don't, unless the image is garbage, which is a possibility. We kind of discussed this a little bit yesterday. But you can't imagine this. If I asked you to outline the ultimate unsurvivable scenario for a politician, I'm pretty sure it would be, and he's married and he cheats on his wife with a porn star, and then he pays her hush money, and it turns out that there was also one, that he was lousy, lousy in bed, and two, that she won't stay quiet. What a great deal maker, by the way, the ultimate deal maker. I got to make great deals. For $130,000, you have to shut up. Okay, fine, I'll take the money. Now, blah 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 blah. I had sex with him, and I had to whack him on the ass with a rolled up news magazine with his daughter on the cover. That's some good hush money. Good job there. We're really going to stick it to the North Koreans. Man, should I continue? Does it matter? I don't know. You know what we ought to do? It's Friday. We are ordinarily without guests. I can see. I wonder if I could even distract Armando from his discussions about the Democratic National Committee that he's having on Twitter, and he can. I wanted to discuss that with you earlier in the week. We didn't have a chance. Maybe that'll help distract us from the nonsense about Trump. There's substantive nonsense about Trump to discuss. He's on his way to Mar-a-Lago, or he wants to be on his way to Mar-a-Lago, and he is currently having the White House say that he won't go if there's a shutdown because, of course, the optics. It would be horrible, and people are discussing this already, and it would be the Trumpiest thing ever, and nothing will piss him off more than skipping any weekend at Mar-a-Lago, but particularly this one. One, there's golf. Two, apparently he had planned a $100,000 per couple fundraiser for his re-election campaign planned for Mar-a-Lago, which of course also means that he pockets personally a good portion of the proceeds because the rental fee goes directly to him. Anybody who forgets that, or anybody who, I'm sure his supporters think it's all fantastic because he's saving so much money, and they might even think he's saving the taxpayers so much money. No, but they probably believe it. He's saving the taxpayers so much money because he's having a fundraiser, sure, but other politicians have to pay for the fancy venues where they hold these $100,000 plate or $100,000 couple fundraisers, but he owns that fancy thing, so he's saving the taxpayers money. Of course, you wouldn't be saving the taxpayers any money. You would be saving perhaps donors money, but you're not even doing that. And why? Because he charges his campaign rent for the hall. Why? Because he owns the hall. And what it means is you can take donors' money, put it in your campaign bank account, and then say, okay, how much does it cost to rent this banquet hall? It costs $25 million. And no one can argue. And you direct your campaign fund to pay the $25 million to rent the hall to Donald J. Trump, or rather the Trump Organization, or Mar-a-Lago, which means it goes to him. And that washes, that's the laundering. That's money laundering. That's self-dealing is what we call it, rather than money laundering. It is money laundering, but it's when you do it all by yourself and you are both ends of the bargain. That's self-dealing. And so, yeah, you can just launder money that legally is supposed to be going to campaign activities to yourself by saying, I'm renting a hall from myself. It happens all the time. And Trump isn't the inventor of it. People have done it differently in many ways for a long time. None so outrageously and audaciously as Donald Trump, to be sure. But typically, you'll find in any given election cycle probably a dozen or more members of Congress or people running for Congress, if they're rich people beforehand, renting office space from themselves. They own an office building. I'm going to put my campaign headquarters in here. My campaign is going to pay rent. The rent goes to me. That's kind of the way it works. They do that stuff all the time. Anyway, wow, let's check in, touch base, and try and get my head around the rest of the day as more and more things flying by on Twitter. I can't even keep up. Anyway, Daily Kos Radio, as you may have guessed, is now live. Bill told you that 10 minutes ago, all the way from Portland, Maine, and I'm going to repeat that now. Daily Kos Radio is live now. I got to see what I'm going to do for the day. What am I doing? I'm going to ask the timeless philosophical question, what is the sound of one hand clapping as a porn star spanks the president with a copy of Forbes that has his photo on? Oh, it's his photo? Is that right? I somehow thought it was Ivanka. Anyway, man, where do we go next? Currently circulating on Twitter and like directly right in front of my face. That's how it's going to work today. I'm in Trump mode. If it's in front of my face, let's talk about it. David Mack tweeting what? From BuzzFeed News. David Mack. Oh, I see. His name's David Mack. And then I looked at the address. It's David Mack AU. I'm like, is your name Macau? That can't be right. It must be for, yes, it is. Australia? I guess he's Australian. David Mack for BuzzFeed, tweeting around. We might as well just let go. One day I'm just going to let go of all convention and say, we're not taping for broadcast radio anymore. We're going to say all the words. He said, holy S, holy S, holy S. What could... so bored with holy S stories. What could you possibly be holy S'ing about? I guess this comes from In Touch magazine. Here's our first clip circulating for the day. We'll start up here at the top. He had a private bungalow out back. That would be Trump, I assume, which is cool because I'd never been there and I haven't been there since, Stormy says. I think. Anyway, they have these like individual cottages there. Cool. They're pretty nice. I went there. We had dinner once again in his room. By the way, high roller, living on the town. One of the things that struck me as very probably true about the story, but also very Trump, was that the hook was he invites her to dinner. You want to go out to dinner tonight? You want to go to dinner? He doesn't say out to dinner. See, maybe he does. I mean, he's a liar, so he might say out to dinner. This is the hook that he uses to lure the porn stars, and he tried it with 3 of them that we know of, from the trade show booth they're working at into, his room. You want to go to dinner. And they say, yeah, sure, because they're like, they know what it might mean. They're porn stars. They understand pretty well what the dynamics are and what people are after. That doesn't necessarily imply any consent. It's just they know what people are going to be after, but they also know that they can probably take care of themselves pretty well. And it may also be that they say, some of them may have the attitude of, and if there's sex involved, it's not the worst thing in the world. He's a very rich guy. He has a television show. It could be good for me all around. He's a celebrity. This is interesting. It's a story. Let's do it. You want to go have dinner? Yeah, I want to have dinner. Or he's rich. He could take me to the best restaurant in Lake Tahoe, someplace I'll never get, And if he's a regular-ish rich guy, he's going to take me to the best place and get the best table and order off the menu and all that kind of stuff. It's setting up really nicely. So she gets all dressed up, which for a porn star is probably pretty unusual because they spend the rest of their time undressed. Anyway, shows up at his room / bungalow. No slash, it is a bungalow. And says, all right, fantastic. Knocks on the door. Apparently the bodyguard who was with him all the way up until like a couple months ago in the White House, right, answers the door, escorts her in, and he's all decked out in sweatpants watching television on the couch. And it becomes obvious right away they're not going anywhere for dinner, which normally is a bad sign. And this was a bad sign. They had sex. I mean, that's horrible. When Donald Trump was involved in the sex, that's the worst thing I can imagine. But it becomes obvious very quickly they're not going anywhere. But in addition to which, it's like, I'm not even getting the dinner out of this. Like outside, oh, you want dinner? Okay, fine, sure, we'll have dinner. They order into the room, which I'm sure the Lake Tahoe resort, nice room service and everything. But she thought she was going to get a nice dinner out of it. And she got, come watch television with me in sweatpants here. All right, so anyway, back to this particular snippet of the story. He goes in. She goes and she goes back for dinner. Now that, that's the second night in a row, I guess, that she goes back for dinner. So it's not horrible. She can survive it. She's getting good stories out of this. And apparently the sex doesn't bother her a great deal. Again, she's kind of she's a sex worker. So, okay, fine. She's not working now, but fine. It doesn't matter to her. So she had some swordfish. That sounds good. Once again, no alcohol. That rings true, right? He doesn't drink. The strangest thing about that night, and, that's hard to pick. The strangest thing about that night, maybe this isn't the same night with the magazine spanking. This was the best thing ever, she says. You could see the television from the little dining room table. Of course you could. It's Donald Trump. Remember we learned the other day, did I say on the air? Oh, I don't even know if I told this story on the air. That, I'll get back to it. Let me finish this clip. God, just focus. I need some medication or something. You could see the television from this little dining room table, and he was watching Shark Week. And he was watching a special about the USS something. What is that? The Indianapolis? What's the one that sank famously in the shark attacks? All right, well, I don't remember offhand. I've never watched Shark Week, and it's been too long since I watched Jaws. They mention it in Jaws. You all know what I'm talking about. And it sank, and it was like the worst shark attack in history. I like the way she speaks, by the way. She should come on the show. He is obsessed with sharks, terrified of sharks. Why watch the Shark Channel if that's the case? But I don't know. Terrified of sharks. He was like, I donate to all these charities. He doesn't. It's the foundation. I donate to all these charities, and I would never donate to any charity that helps sharks. I hope all the sharks die. It's like talking to like a 7-year-old or something. I hate sharks. Okay, yeah, I'm afraid of sharks, I guess, right? I don't obsess about them. What a thing to say. I donate to all these charities. I would never donate to any charity that helps sharks. Like, I don't think sharks should get, discounted clothing or help with their meals or anything like that. Help sharks? Are there charities I'm sure there are charities that preserve endangered sharks or whatever. I don't know if that's what he thinks they are. He thinks they are scholarships for Shark College, probably. I hope all the sharks die. He was like riveted. He was like obsessed. It's so strange. I know. And it is very strange. It's not stranger than spanking him with a magazine, but it is strange. And I'm kind of amazed by the whole thing. And it occurs to me that the hoax story from the other day about him being transfixed by a fake gorilla channel was only off by this much. I mean, Shark Week and that exists, but there he is, watching all this stuff and then gabbing about the animals. Now, he's not, watching sharks fight and rewinding it and watching it over and over again. But the more I hear about, the more stories you hear about it, the more this stuff rings true. I can't tell you, there's no other conclusion you can draw. The Michael Wolff book is right, the P-tape is real, and it's probably the least disgusting thing we'll hear about him for the next week and a half. So let's go. Everybody insists the sound is fine, so I'm glad it's going out well for the rest of you. I definitely hear an echo, but it's not totally unpleasant. It's not very long delayed. It's just like I'm talking in a hallway, like a big hall, and there's a huge audience out there. So that seems appropriate, even if the audience isn't huge necessarily. What else are we checking in on here? Michael Musson's been listening to this filthy tale and has this to say. But has any president charged rent to the Secret Service before? I don't know. Vice President Biden apparently did. And that's a big effing deal because everything's a big effing deal to Joe Biden. I don't know whether any president ever has before. I don't think there have been that many occasions to do so. I understand that the Clintons, who had to set aside space at their home in New York following Bill Clinton's term in office, they did set aside for a space for the Secret Service, but they waived the rent because they know what it looks like to charge the Secret Service rent. Meanwhile, oddly, Joe Biden did not. But I don't know. I don't know whether that'll ever become an issue because right now we have a president who has sex with porn stars. So tell me about the rent again. Anyway, Michael also says, the big question about the porn star dinner is whether Trump still got 3 scoops of ice cream. He did. I won't even tell you where he put them. Right? Okay, so we can just leave it at that. I don't know. Maybe. Let's see. What else have we got to catch up on? Man, there's a lot. Let's see. I'm going to have to check around for my other sources here. And look at Pocket, look at my Twitter. My Twitter feed has been just an unbelievable mess in the last couple of hours because the garbage that's flying around the internet is just so entertaining. Let's see. Oh, yes, right. There's the shutdown. We definitely have to get back to that. Oh, news from the I told you front. You have to say it that way. It's not the I told you front. It's I told you front. I hate to say I told you so. So I drop so from it entirely because I love to say I told you. But so is too many words. I don't like to. I do hate to say I told you so. But there's news from USA Today. And if it's in USA Today, you know it's written without long words. And so therefore we will read it on the air. Let's see. This isn't the tweet I was looking. This is not the tweet I was looking for. But a little bit earlier, I got to brag on Twitter this morning. Hey, who's got two thumbs? A president who F's porn stars and predicted this story over a year ago. I'm doing the little this guy motion right at you. This guy right here, USA Today, reporting the following. Come on, computer. That's a different headline. So let me read you what it says in the tweet. The tweet says, 1 year after Trump's inauguration, no one will say how they spent the money. The headline now reads, a record $107 million was raised for Trump's inauguration. So where did it all go? No one will say. I will say it went to the Trump family. Now, I can't prove it, but that's not my job. I just allege these things, and then we all believe it, and we say it, and then somebody else comes up with the proof, and I refuse to subscribe to their newspaper. That's how it works. Anyway, let's tell you what USA Today, which I don't subscribe to, has to say about the subject. Frederica Schouten, Schouten, Schouten. I'm shouting. She's shooting. Stay away from her. I don't know what kind of a shot she is. Anyway, why do I try these things? Nearly a year after President Trump's inauguration. Almost there, by the way. Today's the 19th. Tomorrow's the 20th. That would be our 1-year anniversary. Nearly a year after President Trump's inauguration, the committee that raised a record $106.7 million, they rounded up in the headline, for the event, the inauguration, has not disclosed how much surplus money it still has or provided a final accounting of its finances. Now, the reason, of course, that got me excited, besides the prospect of finding out that he stole all the money, is that I really did tell you that over a year ago. I found some of the old tweets just to kind of prove that that was the case. The earliest ones that I came across in my brief search were from November 30th, 2016. But it was a theme I continued with throughout November and December. The November 30th tweet says, Trump having admitted to self-dealing, and I can't remember exactly what instance of self-dealing that one was, but Trump, just having admitted to self-dealing, faces no reporting requirements on expenditures by his inaugural committee, which I hashtagged President-Collect, because, of course, he was the president-elect at the time. Later on, 18 December, I tweeted a reminder, FEC, and this was the factual basis of the whole thing, the FEC does not even have a form for disclosing the expenditures of an inaugural committee. That in response to Brendan Nyhan tweeting at the time, the question, who is reporting on the merchandise money, where it's going, how it's being spent, etc., post-campaign? Good question. But my question was, why are there no reporting requirements? There are receipt requirements. You have to disclose who donated, but you don't have to disclose who got the money. And that seemed like too big of an opportunity for Donald Trump to pass up. And my initial guess was that if they declared it at all, if there was any records kept anywhere, and since there aren't any required, I don't imagine that they would have burdened themselves with paperwork if they didn't have to. But my guess was that if there were paperwork and they needed to come up with something, that they would say, well, this is a big-time celebrity event. I am going to charge my customary appearance fee at this event. I'm the big draw here. I, Donald Trump, will receive $1 million for agreeing to appear at whether it's my own inauguration, the actual ceremony, or at various celebratory balls, which, by the way, is what Stormy Daniels called his. Anyway, moving back to the story, if I appear at your ball, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to ruin the story that way. You pay me $1 million. Or rather, the inaugural committee, anyway, will pay me $1 million. If Ivanka appears, same deal. Jared, Ivanka, everybody in the family, anybody I want gets $1 million or any number I put on it to appear at your function. Don't worry about it. One, you're not going to have to pay it. And two, there's nothing illegal about it. And there really isn't, except for the fact that it's self-dealing. You can get caught under that. But in order to do that, you need to have somebody who will prosecute you. And I own the prosecutors. I get to name who they are, and I can fire them if they do this. So it's a great deal. So we don't know yet what mechanism they used to steal all the money. We don't know yet that they did steal all the money. At one point, there were some claims that charities were going to get the money. And that means David Fairholt will be on the case, calling every charity and asking, did you ever get any money from the Trump inaugural committee? And it was a committee. They had their own bank account and everything. So the checks would be identifiable. Of course, no one will have gotten any such money, or very few people will have gotten such money. And he'll compile a comprehensive list and come to the conclusion that at the very least, none of the charities got it as promised. And then the question will become, where did it actually go? If it comes out that I'm right, if it finally comes out that he actually paid that money to himself and his family, just want to let you know, I'm putting everyone on notice, I'm declaring myself king of the world. I am taking over all Sunday talk shows, and Kagro in the Morning will rule the media universe from here on in. And the country will get a hell of a lot better, I think, as a result. Don't you? We'll find out more and we'll come back. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning, interrupting this little break to say thanks so much to all of you who are contributing supporters of Kagro in the Morning. Thousands of you are downloading the show each day, but fewer than 1 in 25 regular listeners are donating to help keep us on the air. For the money you'd spend on a single 3-minute iTunes song, we bring you 2 hours of great news and entertainment every day, 5 days a week. Patreon.com, Patreon.com makes it easy. You can find us there by searching KagroX or David Waldman or Kagro in the Morning or even Daily Coast Radio in their search box, and you'll be right where you need to be to make easy, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Once again, thanks so much for your support. Welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Oh, wow, I've played with some dials a little bit, and the echo is gone, but we got a different effect going on here. Oh, there's the echo again. If I turn that knob back down, I can't find it. As long as you don't hear it, I don't care, except it does bother me a little bit that I can't consistently get the same sound day after day, no matter how much effort I make to lock down all of the control panels, and that, bodes ill, generally speaking. Anyway, thank you to Athena, who has sent around a fun graphic to illustrate what's going on with the inaugural funds. 45 to the inaugural committee, saying, you get $1 million, and you get $1 million, and you get $1 million. Family grift of America, illustrated, of course, with the Oprah Winfrey, 46th president of the United States, apparently. GIF, even though everyone knows that it's GIF, as we're constantly reminded by Greg when he's on, but he's not here today, so it's GIF. We should get Armando and Greg just to argue about that. Michael Musson, did you miss this story the first time around? No reporting requirements for inaugural funds? I predict that they are still receiving money and paying it out to the president, and I think that's probably true. I don't know why they would parcel it out necessarily, but I don't know. I don't know why he would ask him, a porn star, to spank him with a rolled-up magazine. So I can't speculate about anything like that. Let's see. Jingy says, don't sell myself short. I have a massive audience. We wait riveted each morning listening to your refinements of yesterday's happenings. You embody this guy, 2 thumbs and all. I don't know if that's really, that's a good review, isn't it? I think so. We'll like to think so. It's hard to tell how massive an audience it is. The best metric we have is Libsyn, and I'm going to fight with Libsyn right now. I'm going to see if we can't settle this thing at some point. I didn't check my email this morning, but I think they're probably a little bit behind us on the business clock. I think they're in Kansas, maybe, possibly. Anyway, I don't really know, but really, once this is all resolved, it's not a bad thing, not a terrible thing. It's just a dumb customer service thing that I think will resolve now at some point, but if not, we'll see if it becomes an interesting enough story to share on the air. All right, so where were we? USA Today. They were, in fact, breaking the news 1 year and, let's see, November, well, it's the end of November, December. A year and a month after I told you this was going to happen. And, I'm predicting, but not yet proven correct, where the money actually went. But perhaps we'll find out somewhat different. But they did happen finally upon the fact that I revealed to you a year plus ago. There's no reporting requirements. So, let's see. We must decline comment at this time. Kristen Silaro, a spokeswoman for the inaugural committee's chairman, that's Thomas Barak. I never really figured out how he decided how he pronounces his name. Is it Barak, or is it too close to Barack and he's not allowed to say it that way? Is it Barak by any chance? I don't know. Thomas Barak. Let's say that. Why not? Said this week in response to USA Today inquiry about the committee's finances. Barak, a California investment manager and longtime Trump friend, has said consistently that remaining funds would go to charity. But so what? He, like Donald Trump, is probably a gigantic liar. Again, don't blame USA Today for saying that one. They wouldn't have the guts to say it. I'm saying it. He announced plans in September to give $3 million to 3 nonprofit groups, the American Red Cross, the Salvation Army, and Samaritan's Purse, to help with hurricane relief efforts, and said the committee planned more contributions, quote, that serve America's agenda. I know someplace that had a hurricane that needs money, and that the administration is withholding federal money from loans, as a matter of fact. But I doubt whether he knows. And let's see, did the money show up? Officials with the American Red Cross and Samaritan's Purse, a group led by evangelist Franklin Graham, in case you were wondering, declined to comment this week about the inaugural committee donations, saying they do not disclose contributor information. Officials with the Salvation Army did not immediately respond to an inquiry. They may or may not disclose contributor information. We'll see. Presidential inaugural committees are private fundraising vehicles that pay for the concerts, balls, there we are again, and other festivities that surround the swearing in. Trump's committee raised twice the $53.2 million President Obama collected for his first inauguration. I win. See, largest inaugural committee landslide in history. You know he's saying that. The record haul was fueled by big checks from individuals and companies, some with interest before the government. No way. Casino magnate Sheldon Adelson was the single largest donor, contributing $5 million. Federal Election Commission records show. And I think the fact that there are Federal Election Commission records leads people to believe that there are Federal Election Commission records about where the money went, which is not true. The billionaire joined dignitaries on the west front of the Capitol for a prime viewing of Trump's swearing in. Adelson was among an array of wealthy individuals and corporate giants contributing to the celebrations, including the Bank of America, AT&T, Dow Chemical, Boeing, and Quicken Loans. It sounds like I'm announcing either a sporting event on television or back in the day. I should add in Peter Paul, Almond Joy, Mounds, and York Peppermint Patties. It's the sponsorship of the old Charlie Brown Christmas specials. Anyway, within 90 days of the inauguration, the committee must report names of donors who gave at least $200. But and you'll be shocked to learn this, election law does not require an accounting of the spending in those reports, and there are a few restrictions on how leftover funds are used. Wow. I wish we had known that in November of 2016. We did, but okay. We were busy trying to find out still whether or not Trump really was such a cheapskate that he never gave any charity money from his foundation to anybody. Fred Wertheimer of the Democracy 21 Watchdog Group said the committee, as a nonprofit, can't legally convert any of the funds to personal use, such as paying legal expenses for Trump aides caught up in the special counsel and congressional probes into Russian involvement in the election. It's not a piggy bank, he said. They don't care about what it is and isn't. They might just use it that way. And I think you could probably structure the payments such that it works anyway. They are, of course, quite adept at using shell companies and laundering money for people all the time. That's another nugget, by the way, of the Stormy Daniels story that, maybe if we return to it, we'll talk about that. But I bet you heard that one already anyway. If not, we'll get to it. Stephanie Grisham, a spokeswoman for First Lady Melania Trump, who I guess just reads Michelle Obama statements out loud for her, has said some of the leftover funds went to renovation of the White House. That's true. I think they did. I heard them mention that early on. And the Naval Observatory, where Vice President Pence and his family live, when his wife allows him. This week, Grisham referred a question to the inaugural committee about the amount spent. You'll have to ask them, which is, code for we stole it. Steve Kerrigan, who used to serve as chief of staff for Obama's first inaugural committee and chairman of his second inauguration, said it was entirely appropriate to use surplus money for renovations to the White House. Obama did the same and also funded some public outreach programs such as the Easter egg roll with leftover donations. But Kerrigan, who is running for Congress in Massachusetts, by the way, said it's shocking that Trump's team is not disclosing more information about how they are spending the record amount they collected for relatively modest celebrations. Of course, no one was there. Trump attended 3 official balls, for instance, compared to Obama's 10. Aha, he beat you. It is alarming that you would potentially have at least $50 million left over and no sense of how it was spent, he said. Kerrigan said if he's elected to Congress, he would draft a bill to create more transparency in inaugural spending. That's just what we need. More transparency. I mean, we do need that, but mention that around Trump, and you never know what you're going to get. We didn't discuss this yesterday, but yesterday he was off and running, talking about the wall again, but talking about how it needed to be see-through, transparent, so that you could see when people were throwing bales of drugs over the top and you didn't get hit in the head. You remember that whole thing? He's still sticking to that ridiculous story, that's the reason that he wants to have that. And I think we have mostly forgotten. Do I remember this correctly? I very clearly remember that this obsession with having places where you could actually see through the wall came up in response to questions about transparency with respect to the wall. Meaning, of course, as it does with adults, that we wanted to know where the money was coming from, who was getting the money, who the contractors were, how the bidding process was working, etc. So that even if you built this horror of a wall for no apparent reason, we would at least have some assurance that it wasn't a massive grift of some kind. Of course, it will be a massive grift of some kind. And we'll disclose it bit by bit, and we'll find out about it and then recoil in horror, and he'll continue to, go on his merry way, and everybody keeps the money. With occasional firings and disgorgement along the way, a la Whitefish Energy, if they're not just running away with the check after all. But the transparency thing, I mean, I think he just literally thought, yeah, that's a good idea. You got to be transparent because I see your point. You don't want to get hit in the head with bales of drugs getting thrown over the top. No, That's not at all what we're talking about. So I imagine that bringing transparency in the inaugural fund up will only cause him to start wondering about, well, what do they mean? What is it that they didn't think they could see through? They have the bulletproof plexiglass up there. That is transparent. How much more transparent could my inauguration be? Maybe I'll have Melania wear saran wrap at the next inauguration. I don't know. I'm not certain what he's going to come up with for that one. We'll see. Anyway, the point is, I told you, and now we're, moaning and groaning that we didn't know anything about where this money was going to. Oh no, we were never warned. Why didn't someone tell us that he was a grifter and into self-dealing? Well, it's very sad and all, but we're just going to have to soldier on. Speaking of the day's events yesterday, I did see, only this morning did I see Daniel Dale's recap, I guess, of the morning's events yesterday, and it might serve as a good reminder just to round it up, because everything seems like it happened 100 years ago with this guy, but it's all within hours or days, right? First, he starts off the morning yesterday saying, I'm going to Pennsylvania to campaign for a Republican. That's what he tweets out. The White House says, no. He's going to talk taxes. It's a policy trip, not a campaign fundraiser trip. Therefore, you people are paying for Air Force One and the helicopters and the limos and the Secret Service, not the campaign fund, because this is totally not a campaign trip. Or at the very least, if they do things right, they would split some of the costs. Anyway, he then follows up with, I don't like this chip business. And Paul Ryan, for the sake of passing the CR, has to say, no, he really does. The wall has always been the same. John Kelly saying, no, actually we've changed things. There's been a big change here. And finally, pardon me, I had to mute on that one. Finally, Mexico will pay for the wall. Again, Mexico, now they clarify on this one. Once again, the answer is no. Sorry. Not going to help you on that one. So let's see. What other fun things did we see come by this morning? Just want to get a quick refresher on what happened late at night and this morning. I think on substance, where we stand at the moment with the CR and keeping government open, it's not looking too good. The House passed its measure yesterday, as I understand it, and by a rather narrow margin. Some Republican defections, even some Democratic defections to the other side, they managed to squeak by with this thing. But as it stands, the package that they've put together and passed the House does not have the requisite support, or anywhere near the requisite support, for passing in the Senate. And the whole game plan of blaming Democrats for the shutdown because they would refuse to vote for cloture on a terrible package that doesn't include any sort of solution for DACA or CHIP, for that matter, or at least a decent one for CHIP. This one now has the 6-year extension in it. And some people could say, I'll pocket that. That's something. It's, it makes much more sense as a 10-year package, and we need to have DACA addressed, but it is something. You could point to that. Well, anyway, point is, they were planning on blaming the shutdown on Democrats because Democrats in the Senate would almost certainly filibuster this terrible CR, and they could blame it on them. And Bill Scher, I guess, was counting on that. Now it turns out that there may not even be 50 Republican votes for the bill with or without a filibuster. It won't be a matter of, or won't necessarily be a matter of filibustering to kill this thing. It'll just be flat out nobody supports the thing. Now, it may end up still dying on a motion to proceed, but, apparently with Jeff Flake out of the mix, and I don't even know who else they're counting, word is that they wouldn't have 50 even if the Democrats jumped out of the way and didn't filibuster. Not that I think that they should, because you never know with these guys. But don't want to necessarily jump out of the way unless you've got somebody's inaugural balls in a vice, if you know what I mean. Anyway, that made things worse. Let's see. Other things that we should round up. Let's go to Pocket, where most of the substance is parked. Twitter is all the fluff. It's good stuff, but it is fluff. Yesterday, big story. It has resolved itself with the resignation of yet another terrible Trump appointee. I did see Bill in Portland noting for the record that it was your count that there was, is it 25? Did you say members of the Trump administration forced out or retired in the first year of the first year of the administration? I think that was the number, and I can try and scroll back and find this thing. But I would so much like to have Twitter off the screen for the moment so that I can get back to this other stuff. But I think that was the number. The latest horror show uncovered once again heroically by Andrew Kaczynski, K-Files over at CNN. Carl Higbie is his name. Racism is his game, as is the game with all these guys. Trump appointee Carl Higbie resigns as public face of agency that runs AmeriCorps after K-File review of racist, sexist, anti-Muslim, and anti-LGBT comments on the radio. How do you like that? You do not. Anyway, I'm warned that this story contains graphic language, so I'll try and dance my way around that. Trump administration appointee Carl Higbie resigned Thursday as Chief of External Affairs for the federal government's volunteer service organization after a CNN K-File review of racist, sexist, anti-Muslim, and anti-LGBT comments he made on the radio. Effective immediately, Carl Higbie has resigned as Chief of External Affairs at CNCS. Samantha Jo Warfield, a spokesperson for CNCS, said in a statement. The White House did not immediately respond to a request for comment on Higbie's resignation. Higbie did not respond to multiple requests for comment on Thursday. In a tweet Friday morning, Higbie apologized for his comments. Is that today? Wow, okay. I'm sorry. I'm sorry that my words... Oh, I'm not sorry that my words were published. I am sorry that I said them in 2013, he wrote. Those words do not reflect who I am or what I stand for. It's unusual. They usually just say, yeah, I believe that. Screw you. But, okay. Those words do not reflect who I am or what I stand for. I regret saying them. Last night I informed the White House that I was resigning so as not to distract from POTUS's many successes. Hashtag no excuses. Oh, well. Hey, what do you know? Higbie, a former Navy SEAL. We got to look at this Navy SEAL program. I got to tell you, we're turning out some dirtbags. I don't understand this. This has got to be really upsetting to, like, the bulk of regular Navy SEALs who just work hard and, like, serve their country and live honorably. Does this not bother the rest of you? I'm sure it does. There's just no, forum for you to speak out on behalf of all other SEALs. But, okay. Cheapening that brand. Higbie, a former Navy SEAL and conservative media personality, was a surrogate for Trump during the campaign, appearing on cable news and serving as the spokesman for the Trump-aligned Great America PAC. Is that one of the, what do you call them? What's the name of the extraordinarily rich? Mercers. Is that one of the Mercer ones? I'm not really sure. He was appointed to the Corporation for National and Community Service in 2017 to direct the public image and messaging of the federal department that manages millions of Americans in volunteer services like AmeriCorps and Senior Corps. We have our own Walmart greeters, I guess. CNCS, formed in 1993, connects volunteers with service opportunities, often in the neediest areas across the country. They do good things. Higbie does bad things. Let's get to the bad stuff. In one of the comments unearthed by K-File, Higbie says, you could, quote, guess the color of a family he described that lived in his condo association. Oh, boy. I told this story the other day on my show. Somebody who lives in my condo association and has 5 kids, and it's her and her husband with the 5 kids and the mother, the grandmother of the kids. I see, the grandmother of the kids. And they don't have jobs. They're there all the time. It's their house. I bet you can guess what color they are, and they have no job, he said. Oh my. The remark is just one of several racist and inflammatory comments K-File Review found. I will give Kaczynski a lot of credit. How do they even think to come up with, let's find out if this random jackass in the administration had a radio show? I think they all did, so maybe that's it. And he's just systematically making his way through everybody that was appointed. And they haven't appointed a whole lot of people, so it may be even a possible job. As host of the radio program Sound of Freedom, on internet talk radio, like us, Higbee made shocking comments about black Americans, Muslims, women, LGBT people, veterans suffering from PTSD, and immigrants. Why would you do that as a former Navy SEAL? I have no idea. Speaking on Sound of Freedom on in December of 2013, Higbee, while recounting a time he placed an advertisement to give away free firewood, said, quote, "The black race had lax morals." He added that black women think breeding is a form of government employment. What does that have to do with the firewood? Only one person was actually cordial to me, Higbee said. Every other black person was rude. They either wanted me to load the wood, completely split it for them, or some sort of, assistance in labor. Now, mind you, the ad was for free firewood. Come take all you want. And I believe that this translates directly into the culture that is breeding this welfare and the high percentage of people on welfare in the black race. It's a lax of morality. It's a lax, L-A-X, of morality. It's lacrosse. It's the lacrosse of morality, really, is what we're talking about here. It's a lack, L-A-C-K, of morality, or it's lax morals, L-A-X, or it is Higbee is a moron. And obviously, we could have concluded that a long time ago. I don't know. I'm not even going to bother. He has horrible things to say about black people, horrible things to say about Muslims, and I already told you this. What about the soldiers with PTSD? I guess I'm kind of curious about that one. Higbee derided members of the military suffering from severe PTSD as having a weak mind and said 75% of those afflicted were either lying or milking it for federal money. I assume that there's some SEALs that want to beat the crap out of him for that. I invite you to go ahead and do so. Yeah, I'm going to go out on a limb here and say a lot of people are going to disagree with this comment, Higbee said on Sound of Freedom in February of 2013. But severe PTSD, where guys are bugging out and doing violent acts, is a trait of a weak mind. Now, things like military member Brandon, I guess I was talking to a military service person at the time, things like Brandon, where he was legitimately blown up and a loud noise makes him on edge, completely understandable. But when someone performs an act of violence, that it is a weak mind. That is a crazy person. And the fact that they're able or trying to hide behind PTSD makes me want to vomit. Well, that's real nice. Let's see what else is in here. Shooting undocumented immigrants. That's nice. Smeared Dianne Feinstein and Nancy Pelosi. That's just par for the course. Mean to gay people as well, and is a birther. Said people on government assistance shouldn't be able to vote, and other various horrible things. I'm not yada-yadaing at all, but this is, after all, I think, the 25th person forced from the administration, and probably, I don't know how many of them left for various other reasons, but basically every single one of them that has been left or been kicked out has been a virulent racist, not all of whom we have found on tape being virulently racist, but almost universally white supremacists and virulent racists nonetheless. Just thought I would make note of the latest on that one. Let's see. What else have I got here? Oh, here's something that doesn't tell me a great deal about what it is, but Brendan Nyhan on Twitter. What are we talking about? Yes. He was summarizing the events of the last couple of days and using a Wall Street Journal article to do it. We'll see if I can get a hold of that article. I just liked his tweet. The "Who Talked to the President Last" presidency in action here. He has two clips from the Wall Street Journal work here illustrating his point. This one says, around the same time as what? I don't know. Mr. Trump had an idea about how to counter the nuclear threat posed by North Korea. If the U.S. stopped joint military exercises with the South Koreans, it could help moderate Kim Jong-un's behavior. In other words, if we cave and show that we aren't going to show military strength in your neighborhood, maybe you'll like us. That does sound rather un-Trump-like, don't you think? Anyway, Defense Secretary Jim Mattis used an approach that aides say can work. Get this one. He says, that is to say, Mattis says to Trump, your instincts are absolutely correct. And then gets the president to do the exact opposite of what his instincts say, said one person close to the White House. Mr. Trump dropped the idea, although he has ordered aides to give the exercises a low profile, eliminating press releases and briefings about them. Now, there's another clip included here. To convince Mr. Trump to change course, White House aides sometimes stall, hoping he'll forget what he wanted done and move on to something else, like me in the radio show, trying to dissuade him from talking tough trade actions against other countries. Aides caution that such moves could reverse the stock market gains that he touts. Or they might tell him that an action he wants to take on steel or aluminum must wait a month or so until the Commerce Department weighs in. And that's how decisions are ordinarily actually made. But what they're really looking for here is him to forget that he ever asked about it. That's kind of astonishing. I think we all knew that was going on, but it's still rather amazing. It comes from an article in the Wall Street Journal, which, by the way, goes under the title of Talking to Trump, a how-to guide. Insights from more than 50 people the president met with in his first year in office. It's Peter Nicholas and Rebecca Ballhaus, which let's put an emphasis on the ball in that one. Ballhaus. Well, never mind. I was gonna change house to hole, and it's just gonna make the whole thing worse. Take that comment with you over this next 1 minute break. We'll be back and sort it all out. We're back with more of the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. Suffering greatly as I try to keep my throat clear for the day's broadcast. Let's see. I'm just sort of skimming around, trying to figure out whether this article is something we want to wade all the way through. I should just double check and see if I can catch up with comments. I did see Armando chime in at some point, just asking whether the motion to proceed to the CR in the Senate would require 50 votes or 60 votes. The motion to proceed itself, just to make things muddy, the motion to proceed passes on a simple majority. Of course, you can filibuster a motion to proceed, so there needs to be a cloture vote on the motion to proceed first. That would require 60. But they could step out of the way, or, of course, they could change the rules. But I don't get the sense that he's ready to do that. Not because Mitch McConnell would refuse to do that or is afraid of doing that eventually, but because doing it for something that you don't really know what the president's position is, on which you don't know what the president's position is or how much it can change, is just too great a risk. And that may be ultimately, by the way, what saves the legislative filibuster. Mitch McConnell doesn't have very many ideas about what he himself actually wants to do. And every controversial or whatever you want to say about it, every major piece of legislation which might require it could see the president flip-flop to take the hit, if there is one, and maybe there isn't, of changing the Senate rules in order to pass a certain measure, only to have the president withdraw or his support or flip-flop in whatever way, would just be, perhaps too big a risk for him to take. So I don't know that we see that coming anytime soon. But and here's a request if he could come on after 10, which it is now after 10. And so let's say yes, sure, and give myself a chance to hydrate a little bit today. And shift gears a little bit, discussing the DNC meeting. Is that today? We better talk about it then. And any further questions on reconciliation and CRs. There's no reconciliation going on right now, by the way. Do keep that in mind. All right, here's what I'll do. I'll put it to you this way. Armando, you can prepare yourself, and I will skim through this Wall Street Journal article about talking to Trump. I think it's rather revealing. There's a couple of Wall Street Journal articles out there, one of which is the other Stormy Daniels nugget that I had waiting in the wings. Ooh, did my echo just go away? Not quite, but it's very odd. I'm still obsessed with that. Don't worry about it. President Donald Trump, it's still hard to say that, has received huge public exposure in his first year through blanket TV coverage, speeches, and tweets. But what is he like in person? Well, some of the president's most provocative private moments, including getting spanked with a magazine, I had to add that, have made headlines. His demands for loyalty from top officials and his vulgar reference to African nations, for instance. The Wall Street Journal gathered others shared by more than 50 people who met with the president to discuss a range of issues in the Oval Office, on Air Force One, and at Mar-a-Lago in the past year. Here are their insights. Be prepared for a change of topic. Not you. I mean, you should be prepared for that too as soon as Armando calls. But that's what they're saying you expect when you deal with the president. In an early session on his infrastructure plan. Oh, remember it was Infrastructure Week, or we're going to get an infrastructure plan soon, like 2 weeks. Mr. Trump detoured into a riff about part of the road network that has long bugged him, guardrails. Let's see. I got to answer Armando here, but he said I missed it. When should you come on? I should have just talked my way through it rather than bothering to type it. Let me read a little bit of this Wall Street Journal article, and we'll move on to the DNC meeting a little bit after that. How do you like that? So they're talking about infrastructure. And he says, you know what bothers me about infrastructure? You know what I really hate? Guardrails. What? It's put together with these screws, right? He told cabinet members and business executives who nodded solemnly. Oh, yes, it is put together with screws. I always think, if I ever went into that sucker, the guardrail, I'd be afraid that it opens and you get speared. Okay. He continued, I want to hire whoever their salesman is. He's the greatest salesman in the world. That is the worst crap. You know, it's funny. This is the sort of thing that sometimes regarded as like strategic vision in a truly successful businessman. They view this kind of weird bridging of enormous cognitive gaps to come up with something that works as, you know, like next level genius. And I think he's always just had money lying around, so everybody figures he's next level genius. He doesn't have as much as he says he has, or sometimes he's broke and he's just skimming it off of something else. But I'm sure he thinks of himself that way. Of course, it's also parody. Like if you ever watched the Silicon Valley series on HBO, one of the early characters, one of the venture capitalist types, is like famously known for making those kinds of spaced out leaps, but it works for him. So imagine what's going on here. We're talking about infrastructure. That's roads. Roads, next to roads are guardrails. Guardrails suck because they're put together with screws, right? No, I mean, enormous rivets. Is that what you're talking about? Or gigantic bolts? Like, you know, foot-long bolts that are, you know, 2 inches in circumference? Screws. To put together with screws, right? I figure if I go into one of those, I'm going to get speared. That sucker's going to come apart and it's going to spear me. Those things are put together like such utter crap. They're so bad, but everybody's got them, and they're putting together with the same screws everywhere. Somebody's got the market cornered on guardrail screws, and they suck so bad. This guy's probably the best salesman in the world. He's selling deadly crap to everybody, every road person in America. Every road guy is buying the same screws. Find me that guy. And can you imagine being an executive in the Trump organization tasked with finding the guy? There is no guy who sells these screws, which aren't screws and are, I'm sure, used very widely, an enormous variety of things from an enormous variety of sources, putting together guardrails. I got to find the guardrail screw guy, or Mr. Trump is going to kill me. Meanwhile, he's out there being the porn star screw guy and getting spanked with a magazine and telling you what a genius he is. What else have we got here? That's the worst crap. Next section, especially if it involves old enemies and old friends. Be prepared for a change of topic, especially if it involves those people, I guess. In an April meeting focused on bolstering business, Mr. Trump repeatedly interrupted his speech to jab at the news media or call out executives in the audience, many of whom are his longtime buddies. Trump reads his audience and responds to that, says Kathy Wild, president of the Partnership for New York City, an association of executives that organized the White House event. Expect him to be blunt. Meeting last spring with representatives of veterans groups and Veterans Affairs Secretary David Shulkin, Mr. Trump criticized the slow pace of terminating federal employees, particularly at the VA. You just need to start firing people, he told Mr. Shulkin. Let them sue us. I don't care if they sue us, because he's not paying for these lawsuits. Expect him to be blunt to the point of abruptness. Mr. Trump abruptly stood up before a March meeting had finished with 5 chairmen of congressional committees and Vice President Mike Pence. I have to go do some work in the Oval Office. He told them, can you imagine? That's the line. I got to do some work in the Oval Office. That's important. According to one of the chairmen. But if you need me, I'll be in there. That's really amazing. Building bridges. Making allies. He can be persuaded to change his mind. No crap. Mr. Trump was annoyed with Congress last summer for passing legislation imposing new Russian sanctions. He told aides he was inclined to veto the bill because he wanted better relations with Russia. Aides told him Congress would override the veto, making him look weak. Mr. Trump yielded, signing the bill in August. Of course, he never implemented those sanctions, by the way. Still waiting on that. A White House official said the president never gave serious consideration to not signing the bill, but was frustrated at Congress for inserting itself into a foreign policy matter. What else have we got? Let's see. He can be persuaded to change his mind, especially if it's tactfully done. That was the bit we read about before. Around the same time, Mr. Trump had an idea of how to counter the threat posed by North Korea, which he got after speaking to Russian President Vladimir Putin. That part was missing from the clip, wasn't it? That he got it from Putin. How perfect is that? He came up with the idea of maybe if we surrender by not having joint military exercises and showing strength, which would be very Trumpian. If we don't show strength around North Korea, maybe he'll change his mind and be our friend. That sounds like an awfully dumb idea. That sounds like something Kim Jong-un would tell you, as a matter of fact. Oh, no, Vladimir Putin told you that? Vladimir Putin told you how to conduct United States military affairs, and you said, maybe I'll do that? Impeachment immediately? I can't imagine surviving that. But then again, I can't imagine surviving getting spanked by a porn star. Not, physically surviving it, although I might want to jump off of a building if ever, All right, anyway, that's how that happened. Vladimir Putin said, I have idea for you. Maybe you withdraw all U.S. forces worldwide. Maybe. Maybe I move to Transylvania and become Dracula instead. I don't know. That's probably what appears to be happening. That happens every time I do Vladimir Putin. That sounds like a pretty good idea. Let's try that out. Let's see. He can take frankness. That's nice. Democratic Representative Elijah Cummings from Baltimore took Mr. Trump to task for his depiction of African-American neighborhoods as destitute and crime-ridden. Thank you. Most black people are doing pretty good. We have people struggling to make ends meet, but that's insulting, Mr. Cummings told him. Probably nobody has ever told you that. You're right, Mr. Trump responded. Nobody has ever told me that. Mr. Cummings later wound up disillusioned, saying, I don't think it made any difference. I don't know whether I understand that exchange exactly. Does he mean, did Elijah Cummings mean probably nobody has ever told you that most black people are doing pretty good? Or did he mean probably nobody has ever told you that those things that you say are insulting and you shouldn't say them? And he's right about both, but I don't know which one Trump is responding to. Let's see. Sometimes delaying works best. To convince Mr. Trump to change course, the White House aides sometimes stall, hoping he'll forget what he wanted done and move on to something else. This doesn't appear to have changed very much. I got to double check now to see what else got inserted since we last read it. Trying to dissuade him about trade sanctions. No, I think that really that stood intact. But he can also get exasperated. It says people who overheard a phone conversation between the president and Rex Tillerson recall Mr. Trump saying, "Rex, Rex, Rex, how many times do I have to tell you?" He's a real tactician, this guy. During the campaign, arguments are rarely final is the next part. During the campaign, Mr. Trump talked about how the U.S. should have seized Iraqi oil as recompense for the 2003 invasion. Recompense? We invaded them. Okay. In office, Mr. Trump returned to the idea and advisors told him it wasn't feasible. They thought the matter was put to rest. Mr. Trump has since asked about it again. One White House official characterized his question as, "Why do we go into these wars if we don't get anything for it?" Said another U.S. official, "No case is ever settled." Not sure whether, I think that they would like to think that means, he's constantly looking for openings to renegotiate. I think he forgets that he was told the answer last time, and he's a dotard. He's happy to play tour guide. In the middle of meetings with executives and lawmakers, the president sometimes invites them to walk over and take pictures in the Oval Office if they haven't visited before. I mean, who does that? Said Scott Heitkamp, the CEO of Value Bank, who attended one such meeting in March. I disagree. I actually think that's personable and nice. It may seem out of place for a president, but that's actually the most normal thing I've heard in this entire article. Let's see. Next part. Happy to play tour guide, even if the seating arrangement is tricky. Unlike past presidents who often sat on couches with Oval Office visitors, Mr. Trump sits behind his desk, raising the question for guests, can they put their papers on the Resolute desk? At one point, I set my papers on the table, and then I thought, maybe that's not the best form, said former Representative Jason Chaffetz. So I picked them up again and set them back on my lap. That actually sounds like a mental difficulty for Jason Chaffetz, not Donald Trump. That's a weird inclusion. I mean, he's a weirdo too, but he can be courteous with Republicans. When Representative Steve Scalise visited the Oval Office after his return in September from a near-fatal shooting, Mr. Trump made sure he sat in the chair normally reserved for visiting heads of state. That's an honor, Mr. Scalise said. Okay. And with Democrats, Mr. Trump spent months courting Senator Joe Manchin, at one point introducing the senator to an assistant and instructing her, when Joe calls, you make sure to give me the message. That's good. So ending on an up note here for him. I think we're getting towards the end here. And he isn't beyond using chocolate to win someone over. That doesn't surprise me. Ice cream will work too with many people. Mr. Trump invited Representative James Comer, Republican of Kentucky, to fly with him after a rally in Louisville as he sought support for the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. On board, the president asked him whether he had any children. 3, Mr. Comer said. Mr. Trump handed him 3 Air Force One branded boxes of M&Ms. Give them to your kids and tell them they're from me. Normal. But he has a short fuse. Backstage at the National Prayer Breakfast in February, a great place to be short-fused, when Senator Chris Coons, Democrat of Delaware, told Mr. Trump several religious organizations in his state opposed the White House's travel ban, the president snapped, "Nobody told me you were going to be a nasty man." Oh my gosh. Help me, save me from the nasty man. And sorry can be the hardest word for him. Weeks after Mr. Trump's election victory, the incoming president and his advisors were considering how to handle China being upset by a phone call he held with Taiwan's leader. Remember that one? The question of apology was broached. Never, ever apologize, Mr. Trump said. And finally, thankfully, Mick Mulvaney, the president's budget director and frequent golf companion at the Trump course in Northern Virginia, said Mr. Trump will point out arcane features during the rounds, noting which trees have died and which trees to cut down and what greens are struggling with what fungus. Okay, Good to know. I would say the last third of that article is garbage. But I guess they have no editors over there at the Wall Street Journal. That leaves us free, though, to invite Armando to join us anytime at this point. Now, Armando, that will be fine. I'm answering your question of 10:15. It is now 10:17, which gives us 10 minutes before the next and last break, around which we can wrap the discussion of the DNC and their meeting today, I guess, and their votes, and answer any other questions, and see if we can't squeeze in another story or two about what's going on. The Wall Street Journal, I did mention to you, has also got they're the ones with the details on Michael Cohen, why do I say his name so funny? Michael Cohen, the attorney for Trump. He's the says who guy, and that's how I identify him every time. Says who guy, and the guy who says you can't rape your wife. He's the one who handled the legal arrangements for paying off Stormy Daniels. And apparently, for some reason, they decided to do it, they launder money. So they decided to do it by establishing a Delaware LLC to pay off Stormy Daniels. And yet they organized it, and they could have, picked totally anonymous people to be the contacts for this LLC, and they didn't. He put himself on there as one of the officers of the LLC. I cannot figure out exactly why he did that. Maybe he's just one of those guys that wants to get caught. But they also picked the pseudonym for Stormy Daniels under which to pay her, and I thought that was kind of weird and odd and all around. That they would go so far to hide her name, but he wouldn't bother hiding his name. On the other hand, there's probably 10,000 Delaware LLCs with his name on it somewhere. But they also picked a very weird name for her, as I recall. What was the Peggy Peterson or something dumb like that? We have all these great games about how to pick your porn star name, and he picks Peggy Peterson, which, there are various ways to play around with the name and make it funny, but the whole situation is not. I don't know why they did this exactly. So what's the deal? He started a new company called Essential Consultants LLC on October 17th, 2016, down in Delaware. And I don't know. I guess it was set up for the purposes of passing this money around, and I can't really figure out why. Armando says he's having trouble connecting to the show. Let me see if I can, maybe I can call him. Who knows? Maybe this echo is all about, oh yeah, Skype doesn't work at all anymore, so just forget it. Let me try you. And we'll give it, oh, there, I just saw it. Now I see missed call pops up. Call back. All right, we'll try that. I'll click that. Can I just click that? Call back? Yeah, I guess so. All right. See if, we have some nice ringy-dingy music. Hope you can all hear and enjoy that. I wonder if I'll have an echo in Armando's ear.
The person whom you're trying to reach is currently unavailable.
Huh.
Please leave a message after the beep.
Leave a message. Okay. Hi, Armando. It's the Kagro in the Morning Show. We're trying to connect to you right now. Well, you're probably listening, but you're hearing it on about a 15-second delay. Okay. We'll try you again in the future. I don't know what else to say. P.S. Spank me with a magazine. I don't know. What am I going to say? I got to leave. Okay. That's a terrible call. Look, and it leaves a little audio file of it. That's very exciting and interesting. All right. I can't connect to you either. That's sad. And I think troublesome, and obviously something we're going to have to fix before Monday to be sure. What could the problem be? I don't know. Try again, Armando, and let me know what you're seeing. That's all I can suggest. This is highly unprofessional, to say the least. But I guess, by the way, if we absolutely can't connect, then by all means, type me some notes. And if you've got anything written already, that would be fantastic. I would be happy to read it and discuss it that way and limp through the DNC thing, because that is happening today, and you've been so closely wrapped up in all of it. I think it deserves some attention and time. A very ticklish situation they find themselves in now. If I understand where we are now, we're looking for, Armando would be looking for the DNC to reject the recommendation. Oh, here we are. I'm getting a ring. This ought to work. Let's try this now. Hey, Armando, are you there?
I restarted my phone.
Oh, maybe that's it.
Maybe that was the problem, and this time it worked.
Is it do you have an iPhone?
I do.
I'm just curious. Yeah, Apple is murdering all our iPhones, so we have to go out and buy the expensive one.
Exactly.
That's what's happening.
I think this is part of their plan.
I think so. I was just saying though, the DNC thing is
I just want to take 10 minutes to remind people.
Yeah, please do.
If you don't mind. It's an old story. You know my position on this. I've written about it interminably at Daily Kos, and I tweet about it to this sheer disgust, probably, of anybody that follows me, how much I tweet about it. But it's important to me, and no one else talks about it, so I do.
Therefore, we do it here, yes.
And it's simple as this. Today, the Rules and Bylaws Committee meets to take up the issue of the 2020 presidential nomination rules. And the URC, the Unitary and Reform Commission that was formed at the 2016 convention to sort of smooth the waters between Sanders and Clinton supporters, and that worked really well, right? At any rate, they had their series of meetings, and then they had their big meeting in December. And some good things happened, some bad things happened. The main bad thing that happened, the one that most interests me, is there was a resolution to require states where the state government funds primaries be required to use primary results and not suppress voters by imposing a caucus instead of using the primary results. I say voter suppression, people get mad, but I don't know what other word to use. The perfect example is Washington State.
Yeah.
Where the state has a mail-in open primary that has tremendous turnout. In fact, in this case, the turnout was nearly 800,000. Compare it to their record turnout in their caucus. By the way, a caucus that does provide for absentee balloting. It was 226,000. That is nearly 4 times as many people voted in the primary as opposed to the caucus. That is voter suppression that the Republicans couldn't dream of.
Mm-hmm.
It's voter suppression, David, because what does voter suppression mean? It means using systems that discourage voting. The voter ID law doesn't prohibit voting. It merely says you've got to jump through 18 hoops to get a picture ID, government-issued picture ID.
Right.
That is what the Republicans did in Wisconsin, what they've done in Michigan, what they're proposing now in Nebraska. I mentioned Nebraska because Nebraska Democratic Party is all up in arms about this voter suppression scheme by the Republican-led government in Nebraska. And I asked the Nebraska Democratic Party this: what standing do you have to complain about voter suppression when, in fact, you imposed a voter suppression scheme by using a caucus when the state had an open primary? And again, the same type of results accrued as I described in Washington. 80,000 voters participated in the non-binding beauty contest primary.
Yes.
20,000 showed up for the caucus.
Okay, well, yeah, I mean, it lays it
Nebraska
out pretty.
Nebraska also has absentee voting. By the way, Nebraska also has absentee voting. Indeed, it's because of that absentee voting that Clinton ran surprisingly close to Sanders in Nebraska, in the caucus. I don't care who you vote for. Voting is what this should be about. The Democratic Party cannot be a party to voter suppression. It is absolutely undermines our most basic principle of our party, which is citizens have every right to vote, and we should do everything possible to make it easier for them to vote, not harder. That's why we support early voting. That's why we support same-day registration to vote. So you can not be registered, show up the day of the election, and register and vote.
Yeah.
By the way, that is a good proposal that the URC has adopted, which is it urges all state parties to do everything in their power to have same-day registration. By the way, the state of Washington, just yesterday.
You know what, Armando? We're going to have to take our break in a second or two here, but hold your thought, and
okay.
I'll think about eliminating these breaks forever after this.
No. The breaks are good.
Hi, everybody. It's me, David. Let's change things up from the old fundraising pitch for just a minute and talk instead about how you can be a part of our show. If you've got a smartphone or any other electronic recording device, why not sit down and record a segment for us? Read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Then send the file to me at kagrox@gmail.com, and I'll try and work it into the show. Short segments, a few minutes in length, are easiest to fit in. And of course, I can't always guarantee that I'll be able to play everything, but if you've ever shouted at your radio or TV about something you wish was being covered, here's your chance to change that. Make the show your own. Send your submissions to me at kagrox@gmail.com. Welcome back to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I am still here, thankfully, with Armando, who's still talking DNC and the Unity Commission and voter suppression, et cetera, et cetera. I'm going to let you start back in. We left off discussing the example of Washington.
Right.
And I will,
right. And to reset the table today, the Rules and Bylaws Committee of the DNC is meeting, and one of the topics they will be discussing is the recommendations made by the Unity and Reform Commission to, quote, reform, unquote, the nomination process for president in 2020. As I said before, there are some good things in the proposals, but the one thing that sticks in my craw, and it's frankly the most important thing if you care about voter suppression, is they did not adopt a resolution that would have been honoring the mandate of the URC, which it was to encourage the use of primary elections, expanded use of primary elections, to be precise. And the rule that was proposed was that in states where the state government holds a state-funded primary, that is, it doesn't cost the party a cent, that the state parties in those states, the Democratic state parties in those states, be required to use the results of the primary election for the delegate selection process for president at the 2020 convention. The reason why that proposal is so important, and my hope is the Rules and Bylaws Committee takes it up again and adds it to the URC recommendations, is because the use of caucuses when a primary is available. I'm not talking about states that don't hold primaries. Iowa, for example, does not hold primaries because their cash cow is being the first in the nation, and the only way they get to be first in the nation is because they hold a caucus. Otherwise, New Hampshire would have a fit and everything else. You know, we can have a whole nother discussion about Iowa and New Hampshire going first. I'm not concentrating on that today. Today, it's about eliminating voter suppression through caucuses whenever possible. It is possible in states where the state runs a state-funded primary. This proposal would have impacted just 3 states, just 3. Idaho, where the law in Idaho lets a party decide to have a primary, and the state will pay for it, and the state and the party decides whether the primary is open or closed, et cetera, et cetera. If this rule passed, Iowa Democratic Party would have to hold a primary. And I know that Idaho primary caucus goers hate their caucuses because they have it all, particularly in Boise. They have it, and I know Joan has told you about this. They have this huge one-place caucus that is a disaster, and they've done it now repeatedly. But in 2016, it was the worst ever. The people want a primary. The other state is Nebraska, which, as I told you before the break, 4-1 difference in voting. 4 times as many people participated in the beauty contest primary held by the state versus the voter-suppressing caucus held by the Nebraska Democratic Party. Jane Fleming Clev, who is a nice person, has been party to voter suppression. She keeps saying that, well, I don't want this rule, but we'll probably hold a primary, or I'm canvassing party members to decide if we're going to hold a primary. That's not acceptable. Voter suppression should not be an option for a Democratic Party. It should not be an option. It should not be allowed. But the biggest prize, and I frankly think the real reason why Bernie Sanders' members tabled this resolution, they fought against it, was Washington State. As I was saying before, in Washington State, the state funds and holds a mail-in open primary. In that open primary in 2006, 800,000 people participated. It was a beauty contest, but still 800,000 people participated. In the caucus that the Democratic Party of Washington insisted on holding to suppress voters, only 226,000. Over 500,000 Washington Democrats had their votes suppressed by the actions of the Washington State Democratic Party. That is unacceptable. That is outrageous. No one should support this. But the reason Bernie Sanders' people support it is quite clear. Washington State was, by magnitudes, the state that delivered the biggest net gain of delegates in 2016 for Bernie Sanders. He gained over 50 delegates net over Clinton. Yeah. So they don't want to lose that because what do they want? They want Bernie to win. I understand the context of wanting Bernie to win. Republicans want Republicans to win. That's why they're for voter ID. It's not an acceptable excuse for a Democrat.
It's certainly. Well, I mean, I know what the arguments have been for it, and I see a few of them arriving via Twitter now. Although I don't know how convinced I am by it, but I guess one question arises, and I suppose maybe they can deal with this at the time if they do take this up. The only curveball I can see to this is in deeply red states where, like let's say you're really dealing with essentially a Trumpian Republican administration in one of these states. That says,
and what would they do? Well, I've heard this argument. Tell me. No, and I've always asked, what do you think they're going to do?
It's easy to get around. I mean, I think if the rule is just written with a certain amount of flexibility to it or an escape clause of some sort. But in other words, to write the rule for the DNC strictly to say wherever the state will agree to pay for a primary, you must use that result. I mean, if it just says provided that, the things we normally think of as being a fair, free, and open election apply to this so-called primary provided by the state, then we have to take those results. Yes, sure. Otherwise, if it's like, well, we're going to have a primary and the state's paying for it, and guess what? Only one name is going on the ballot. And, well, obviously you can't take that, right? Well, your rule says you have to. Well, okay. How about a rule that says you heavily favor it, but if something horrible and anti-democratic happens during the primary.
Yeah. How about this? I'll give you an opportunity to ask for a hardship exemption, because the scenario you've just described has never happened in the history of man.
Well, sure, but then the president got spanked by a porn star.
Yeah,
so I'm just going to have to go back to that at every moment.
All right, unless the primary process designed by a state is deemed unacceptable by the Democratic Party or something like that. But you can't say, but let's be clear, you can't say a closed primary is unacceptable.
No, that would be, and I know that there would be the temptation to say that's one of the no-nos.
And you can't say that because you have to register 60 days before the election, that's unacceptable. Because, David, the worst primer that you can imagine is more adept at increasing voter participation than the best caucus. It simply is a fact. States have the money to actually hold a bona fide election. You know who doesn't? State parties.
Yeah. Yep, that's true.
State parties can't do it. They can't even do caucuses that are not attempting to increase voter participation. They're disasters as they are. Now, look, Iowa, everyone loves that little Iowa caucus thing with the standing in the corners and the 15% and all that silly nonsense that they do.
Yeah.
But that's their business. Iowa's business is being the first primary. Who else? What else would we care about Iowa? Yes, I am not running for office. I'm not running for president. I can say I don't give a crap about Iowa. Iowa has 6 electoral votes. It's all white. It's run by Republicans. Why do I care what Iowa does? Because they're first. Mm-hmm. That's a whole nother discussion.
Yes.
But the point is, there's no what you're saying. Well, they're going to do this. They've never done it. Idaho, very Republican, lets the party decide if it's going to be open or closed.
Mm-hmm.
Washington State, as I was saying just before the break, just passed same-day registration, which was a big demand of the URC, particularly of the Sanders delegates. Now everybody's done everything they want for primaries, but they still want to keep the caucuses. That's not right. It's not honest. But forget about honest. It's bad for voters. If you care about voters, you should support this rule. It doesn't mean that a state like Iowa has to hold a primary, though they should. But leave that aside.
Okay.
They're not threatened. Iowa's process isn't threatened by this rule. It impacts 3 states. Those are 3. And mind you, if you want to make a rule that says except for Iowa, I'll sign up for that too.
Yeah.
If you're somehow worried that Iowa's going to impose a primary system, I'll give you that thing. Except Iowa's exempted from this rule.
Okay. Well,
and Nevada, if you want to just play the game that that early setup is something the DNC holds dear, which they shouldn't, but they do. Well, then, okay, Nevada also gets a pass. I'll give you Iowa and Nevada. Everybody else, if your state holds a primary, you should honor those results as a state party. Well, I think I don't think it's unreasonable what I'm saying here.
No, I mean, I don't think so. I've always, been willing to agree.
You want to hear my unreasonable proposal?
We might as well.
Okay, my unreasonable proposal was to penalize states that hold caucuses.
Yes, that would be a lot harder.
That's really not fair because the state party has no control. I will hearken back to the unfairness, though, of 2008 when the Florida Democrats were stripped of their delegates because the Republican-controlled Florida government moved their primary up into the window that the DNC didn't want. And the DNC had no compunction in stripping Florida of all of its delegates.
That is true. But that's the nearest parallel, I think, or the nearest analog to the situation I was trying to design for you in Idaho. But where a Republican government can feasibly screw with Democratic Party rules under a neutral cover. Oh, well, we're just, we want the primary. It's important to be early, so we're doing it. And you're forced by a Republican government to do this thing that would violate Democratic rules. It has happened. And
it did happen, and it was an outrage. It should not have happened. Even the funny thing is the draconianness of the penalty was unbelievable.
That's true.
The Republicans actually had the same rule about Florida not moving up, and they actually stripped the Florida in 2008.
Yes,
as
that's
you
right.
know,
Now I recall that.
They stripped them of half their delegates. The DNC stripped them of all of their delegates. So they were not very shy about worrying about Republican governments, state governments doing these poor, horrible things to state parties.
Yeah.
Be that as it may, I'm not even proposing that. My proposal is simple. When the state runs a primary, use the primary results.
Yeah.
Now, what's the counter argument? I thought you were going to bring the counter argument that I hear all the time.
What is it?
Party building.
I agree that there is an element of that. I just think it's way outweighed.
I don't think there's any evidence that there's actually party building, and I think the reason why I reject the argument is it's hard for me to fathom that a once every 4 years event is how you're going to build your party. If that's what you rely on as a state party to build it, you wait once every 4 years?
Well, I don't know that that's the case. It's one of several events that takes place, in a yearly calendar. Once every 4 years, you're going to have a caucus, but it is a big event, just as the national convention is a big event, and state conventions are, and county and meetings, etc. And you see the same people frequently, and you network. I buy that that's a thing. I know that there are people who feel that way. I don't know whether it's a great argument, and it's certainly, in the end, I say, well, it's
Let me ask you
overwhelmingly
this
outweighed
question.
by.
How's that party building through caucuses working out for you in Iowa?
Yeah. Well,
the
not
biggest
particularly
and most participated in, paid attention to caucus. How have Democrats been doing in Iowa lately? How's that Iowa caucus thing working?
I couldn't say that they wouldn't be doing.
Let me tell you how they're doing.
Just as bad if it wasn't for that caucus. But
there is no statewide Democratic official in Iowa. Not one. No senators, no governors, nothing.
Yeah.
That's I'm sorry. And by the way, caucuses don't even get that much attention later anyway.
Yeah.
So this is all just sheer nonsense. I'm not sure what their motivation is. Maybe they like having control if you're a local official, whatnot. But I'll go further. If you really believe it's a party builder, have more of them. Eliminate primaries for congressmen. Eliminate for congressional primaries. Have a caucus instead. Hey, Republicans do that. Remember, that's how they got rid of that one guy in Utah, the senator. He got beat at a convention or a caucus, which is the same thing, right?
Mm-hmm. I guess so.
They knew they couldn't beat him in a primary, so the hardliners in the Utah Republican Party, I forget the guy's name. Mike Lee won, I guess, because he's the new senator.
Yeah. Well,
anyway, he was not right wing enough for the hardliners in the Utah Republican Party, so they got rid of the primary because the guy would have probably won the primary.
Yeah.
Again, to me, I don't even need a general argument about caucuses. It's just as simple. The mandate of the URC was to encourage primary elections. That was what they're said to do. What I'm asking for is the simplest and easiest thing they could have done, and they didn't do it.
Yeah.
They violated their mandate. Now, by the way, there is one thing they do, and I actually want to get your reaction to this. You do know that the URC recommendations require state parties to litigate to the extent possible in order to change the election laws in states that don't have same-day voter registration.
What? Repeat that, if you would.
There is a requirement
in
the URC proposals that a state party where the state does not have same-day voter registration in its election laws must sue the state to try to get same-day registration.
Okay.
Otherwise, they are subject to penalties, including stripping all your delegates.
Again, draconian. Okay.
Yes. So my question to you is, do I have to file a frivolous suit that could be sanctioned? Because I am not aware of any case law or principle of law that would require a state government to have same-day registration, voter registration.
Yeah, I mean, it's just in order to light some money on fire, I guess.
Yes, because our state parties have so much money.
Yeah. Armando.
That's a bad proposal.
Yes.
But I'm not even arguing about that. You want that stupid proposal? Do it. I want my proposal, which is to force the use of primaries when the state funds and runs the primary.
Yeah.
Ironically, the 3 states that this would impact already have either open primaries or same-day registration. So the big concern about closed primaries isn't even on the table. There's nothing but cynical desire to favor and protect a candidate. And that's frankly what was wrong with the URC. The whole idea of Hillary naming half and Sanders naming about half was flawed. You don't do reform when people have axes to grind. There should have been a blue ribbon commission with nobody standing with nobody, if you could find it.
That's true. I am a little bit disturbed by that. That didn't make any particular sense to me. I guess it made some sense in the context, the time frame that we were talking about. But like the idea
it did make sense. It was just practical. Clinton just wanted to shut them up. And Bernie, I guess, probably played the long game and wanted to fix some rules to favor himself. And, boy, he's done it. He's done great. You know what? This is actually a feather in his cap. The guy played hardball. And as of today, he's reaping some real benefits.
I guess there you go. There's a silver lining there for a complimentary silver lining for Bernie fans and all this. People who, and you should remember this, there's a lot of Hillary Clinton fans who throughout the campaign were very dismissive of Sanders' ability to produce, to work within Congress and make things happen. Oh, he always proposing these outlandish pie-in-the-sky ideas, and he's getting nothing done. And I recall from working on his 2006 Senate campaign that one of the things we had, to do a lot of explaining about was that Bernie Sanders occupies this very strange place in Congress as an independent, and it was much more obvious how independent he was at that point in 2006. But operating as an independent and playing sometimes down the middle and sometimes playing parties off of one another. And he would very quietly he got very little in the way of named sponsorship, legislation passed from beginning to end as the Sanders bill. But he played the actual game of using committee proceedings, playing one side off the other, et cetera, to get bits and pieces of his proposals inserted in other people's legislation and put into law. But you have to really be concentrating hard on what goes on in order to trace that stuff. Of course, that's his job. He's tracking his own legislation. So he knew offhand that he had been quite effective. And this is a great example of it, of playing the system very well, despite the fact, as people frequently remind, well, he's not even a Democrat. Well, he did a hell of a job rolling the Democratic Party for not a Democrat. Now, can we reconsider how effective he could be in Congress? I think that's only fair. We could say that.
I think Bernie is fine in terms of his effectiveness. He's no better or no worse than most senators who have spent the same amount of time. I think that was one of the sillier criticisms of Bernie. Well, he's not.
Agree.
Sure,
okay.
He is. He gets what he can get because you're one of 100, and if your party's not in control, even less so. And of course, Bernie caucuses with the Democrats. He's now in Democratic leadership. I think he's a little silly to keep calling himself an independent. He seems to have either some personal vanity value in it or whatever. But he's a Democrat for all intents and purposes. I've never worried about whether he calls himself a Democrat or not. I think it's bad politics for him in a primary, and I think that's why it's a mistake. But in terms of his effectiveness as a senator, I don't agree that it impacts it at all. I mean, Angus King isn't any less effective because he's an independent, and no one's yelling about Angus King. So
That's the time to start.
That's just partisanship. The people still mad about Bernie running and some of the reactions. It's silly, but he has manipulated this process beautifully.
So good job.
And listen, take a guy like Joe Biden, who probably wants to run and is doing well in the polls. And there's a poll where he's leading Bernie by like 14 points in a Democratic primary. And it's pretty simple thing right here. Joe Biden's people aren't thinking about the process. And then it's going to be 2020. And if Washington still has a caucus, Bernie's going to beat him bad in Washington again. And he's going to add a lot of delegates. And if sweeps in Idaho, that's another 15, 18 delegates. And all of a sudden, you're talking about 70 delegates margin. And we know 70 delegates can make the difference. That's how Obama won by 100.
Yeah. I guess that's true.
So when Biden loses and he starts whining because he didn't come fight now the rules, I'm going to say you proved that you weren't capable of thinking far ahead enough to be president. Bernie Sanders did. So point to Bernie Sanders over Biden on this. Right now, I give credit to Bernie Sanders for being a tough hardball player in the party, whereas other potential candidates have sat this fight out. And when they suffer the consequences in 2020, I, for one, will not shed a tear for them.
All right. I like that as an argument and as a rant. I think we should have to leave it there.
I'm going
to just close
before
to
you wrap me up.
Oh, no problem.
You say something
We're gonna have
all
to leave
the time.
It there.
You want to have influence. You want to have a voice. You show up.
Yes.
Nobody showed up to this but Bernie Sanders. Good for him.
That is true. Another good point. And it's the way you come out ahead in those caucuses, too. If you can suppress the vote, you can only suppress it to some certain extent. Those people who are dedicated to showing up come hell or high water will be there. And sometimes that inures to the benefit of the Democratic establishment, sometimes not. But, if you want more than just the people who are able to or willing to set aside their entire lives for one day or not risking losing their jobs, etc., in order to do that, then you got to go to the primary system. All right. Well, that said, that's true. You can affect things if you show up and fight, and the time to fight about the rules for 2020 was now. And if you weren't on hand,
it's today.
Yeah.
Today at the Rules and Bylaws Committee.
All right. I believe Joe Biden can get there if he needs to. Or send
he
somebody.
Absolutely can pick up the phone and tell people how to vote.
Right. Don't use Skype. It might not work. But
if Joe Biden doesn't do it, that's on Joe Biden.
Yes.
And if he loses because of it by 70 to 100 votes, delegate votes, I, for one, will say just deserts. Because, Joe, when they were making the rules, you didn't do a thing. You didn't show up.
Yeah. Well, that's maybe. We'll see. I guess we'll have to take attendance at today's meeting and see who's there for who. I don't know if anybody will be identifiable at this point, as surrogates for Gillibrand or anybody else. But Warren, or I don't know, pick a name out of a hat, I guess, or out of a canister, as the case may be.
Well, Warren would probably prefer caucuses, so the rules that Bernie's making are probably going to be favorable to her, too.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, so that's
yeah.
Oh, well, there's one other thing I wanted to say about why the rules are going to matter even more. If we have a 16 or 17 candidate field,
yes,
and we end up with 7 or 8 going forward in February, March, and April, which we very well may.
Yeah.
Every delegate is going to count.
Yeah, and the fight for them, well, I guess, begins now. Point well taken.
This is when the rules start.
Yeah.
When Hillary Clinton blew it in 2008 by agreeing to the penalty for Florida, it cost her. It cost her probably the nomination, I would argue. She blew it. Her people blew it.
Wow.
And in 2016, when she should have fixed, if she wanted to rig the primaries and do a good thing, she should have, the run up to it, she should have argued for a new calendar. Iowa and New Hampshire were not favorable to her. She should have had some other states go first.
She clearly
But
didn't
anyway,
view Sanders as a serious contender or a threat. So always take it seriously and always prepare ahead of time. Thanks, Armando. We do definitely have to cut out now. But I'm happy to talk to you about it further, or even next week. We can wrap up exactly what happened and figure out what went right and what went wrong, if we can identify such things. Please do accept that invitation, and we'll bring you back on, as always.
Well, I barged in anyway. So.
Okay, no problem. I'll look for that. Thanks so much. It is Friday. It's time not only to, thank you, you do the same, not only to hand the microphone back over to Justice for the West Coast Speakeasy and the Cafe, but I've already lost my place here. Oh, I didn't get to all of these fantastic stories that we had today. I'm sure that they will check in on a number of them. If not, they'll still be happening on Monday. He's got a cornucopia, as usual, of all the stories we didn't get to, coming up next on the West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy.
From Daily Kos Radio on netrootsradio.com. You have been listening to the Kagro in the Morning Show
with David Waldman.
See, I almost ruined that and wanted to call it the West Coast Cafe for some reason. What's up? Let's see. I can at least pull one or two things here. Mark Warner and Elizabeth Warren aim to protect data stemming from the Equifax breach. And then on the rest of the menu, looking at comprehensive analysis of the report on Russian interference Senate Democrats released last week. Much more, too.